How about now? Oh,
Okay, now it started.
okay.
Right. Yeah, so hi everyone. Today we will have our behavioral model session. Without Christina, I will be in her stead. So for today, what we have is I would like to go over, as usual, our items in the project in the GitHub. Also, there was an email by James. So we'll probably start with what James uh, had to say for this meeting, and then follow up with the usual review of the assigned items. Yeah. So James, would you like to start? Oh, sorry, John, not James. Sorry, James from the it's from the previous meeting. John, my bad.
Yeah, I mean, I think on the last call, I don't think you were on it, Marion, but I sort of brought up this issue that I had done some experimenting on Azure, and it appeared to me like the connection tracking behavior was like a little bit different than what we have planned for Dash. And I just wanted to, make it known that like that was the case. And I think Gerald said, that absolutely, like the intention is that we can do the exact behavior that's being done today in Azure. He said, although some behaviors may be debatable, and we can have the debate. He just asked me if I would send my notes. And so that's what the email was about. It was just kind of sending the notes about the behaviors that I observed on Azure for connection tracking.
Yes. So now the question is: any of the differences desired to be taken back into the behavioral model?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need, yeah, I mean, I think if it's our intention that the behavioral model, match the requirements, and those behaviors are requirements, then, yeah, I think we need to. Although I don't think it like necessarily like changes a lot of what's already planned. Like, I think we have a connection tracking logic that's planned, and it's based on the open contrail logic. And I think these behaviors are kind of like sort of in addition to those. They're not like completely different from those. So like I think it could be done in phases. Um, but yeah, I think that we would want to get the correct behaviors in the model.
So let me bring up the email.
Yep.
Okay, so here is the summary. We have two cases: VNet across VNet traffic and intra VNet traffic. So within those, we have UDP TCP for UDP. Let's start with UDP. So if everything if we apply the corresponding policies for allowed, not allowed ports, this will be observed if the packet is first sent on allowed destination port and a response is sent on a denied destination port, the response is received.
Right.
So how is that different from our behavioral model?
No, I think the UDP is like pretty much like what we would have expected. The only thing that I observed here is that it looks like the timeout from the connection table is 5 minutes. Okay, so that's just like a piece of information, is that it's just a 5-minute idle timeout once the, connection is established or UDP connection is established.
Right, but shouldn't the timeout be configurable?
It probably should be, and I think that there was discussions in the past about like it could be configurable. It can come from the route entry. There's like all different ways that the timeout might, be flexible. But I'm just saying this is what I observed. So it was really like with TCP where I saw some, more detailed kind of behavior.
So yeah, about TCP, the bulk of your explanation is about timers and their values. But regarding the behavior, what is,
Yes.
I'm wondering how we can define what is the difference between behavior you observed and behavior that we are right now have?
Okay, so there are a couple of things. One has to do with, like, you're right, like when you're in the sort of SYN handshake, it's a 5-second timer. When you're in the established state, it's a 5-minute timer. And again, these could be configurable. And then when you're in the FIN, when you're in the FIN handshake, the timeout is still 5 minutes, except like when you get that final ACK, it appears like the connection is removed like as quickly as possible. But I actually observed that some packets can sort of get through after that final ACK. So like all of that like is like fairly consistent with what we have already planned. However, like I did observe that sequence number tracking on both the SYN handshake and the FIN handshaking. The FIN handshake is I'm absolutely certain that it's being done today. That if you don't have the correct acknowledgement numbers, like if you just did the simple SYN, SYNAC, ACK, and said, oh, that's good enough for the connection to be established, that's not how it behaves today. Like today, those acknowledgements have to be for the correct sequence numbers. So
but we
I know
also have planned for sequence number tracking as well.
We have on both the SYNs and the FINs. It's in there. Okay, so here's where I saw maybe the most difference is when you have an established connection, or even like it's not even established, but there's a connection in the connection table, and a new SYN comes that would match that connection. In one case, if the SYN is like allowed based on the ACL, then it's as if you're just starting brand new on that connection. Like you go back to the state of like of the 5-second timeout and the SYN handshake. Okay, so this is like a case that like I don't think is handled in the code that we have today. That open contrail code, but it's a case that I think we have to handle, which is there's a connection in the connection table and a SYN comes in. Like, what do you do? And if the SYN is allowed, it appears as if the connection just like starts back at its initial state, which kind of makes sense. If the SYN is not allowed by the ACL, it looks like the connection's like completely removed. Like if you send a SYN in the like non-allowed direction, like it at that point, like any packets you send will black hole. So it appears as if like a SYN in the non-allowed direction just has the effect of removing the connection from the connection table.
That's a control or the desired behavior.
That's what I see on Azure, and it's probably the desired behavior.
I see.
Right. So I think like that's a behavior that we would want to try to put into the behavioral model. And then the other behavior that I saw had to do with like reset packets. And it looked like if there's a reset packet, it looks like, to me, the behavior looks like the timer just gets shortened to 5 seconds, but any packets are allowed in both directions. And if those packets are sent in either direction, the timer like continues to extend for like the 5 seconds. So, you know, after a reset, you could keep that connection open as long as there's packets within 5 seconds. And so those are the behaviors that I saw. So like, I think, like you said, Marion, it's mostly about the timers, but also the SYN and reset cases, maybe like a little bit
Yeah,
more
those two,
detail.
yeah, those two are
And-
new.
Yeah, and then there was this observation about like when you're in the same VNet. And what I observed when you're in the same VNet is that the UDP behavior is exactly the same, but the TCP behavior seems completely stateless. I was unable to show like any kind of stateful behavior within the same VNet. Basically, what would happen is any TCP packet would be allowed, regardless of your security group, so long as it wasn't a SYN packet. And if it was a SYN packet, then it looked like the SYN packet followed the ACL. But like none of the other packets followed the ACL, and they couldn't detect any kind of timers or anything. So I suspect that like on Azure today, for packets that are on the same VNet, they made some kind of a implementation trade-off, scale trade-off, performance trade-off to loosen the security of TCP connections within the same VNet. I'm guessing, and I think Gerald would have to speak to this, or some of the engineers from Microsoft would have to speak to this, that this is probably not like the desired behavior, but just something that they did to simplify or improve the performance of their implementation.
Yeah, so for the last point to be actually reflected in the behavioral model, ACLs, permit deny rules don't have a notion of the VNet. They only look at the ENI. So there should be someone who actually knows which ENIs are in the same VNet, and then so it could be either achieved through a control plane that actually tracks all of that and does not deploy rules within the VNet, or does not enforce the rules within the VNet. So yeah, if we would want to explicitly do that, it would require us to redefine how the ACL rule looks like. Yeah, so that's, we can leave it as an open question, because if it's purely a performance optimization, I don't think it has to be incorporated into behavioral model.
Totally agree, and I don't even think it has to be incorporated into the implementations, right? I think that this is just like maybe like a compromise that was made by Microsoft, but it would be nice for them to kind of confirm that.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so from what I understand, we have two new items that we would want, at least two new items that we would want to put in the backlog. First one being behavior of connection tracking with regards to SYN for the connection that is already open.
Yes.
Number two is actually having a timer after reset.
Yes. A different timer. Yeah.
Yeah. And anything else that we can derive from that?
No, and just the confirmation that that sequence number tracking is being used.
Yeah.
All the time while established or just for fins?
Handshakes.
For sins and fins. So like there's a different timer before you get to the established state. There's a 5-second timer, and then it goes to a 5-minute timer once you're in the established state. And Andy, you can't get into that 5-minute timer state unless you use the correct acknowledgement numbers to match the sequence numbers of the sins. So it's kind of like proof that that the current implementation depends on the sequence number tracking.
Did you do any tests to see whether there was a window during after established on data packets in the established phase, or is it just the sin and fin that were checked?
Yeah, I didn't check to see whether there's like window checking. There is, I know that some connection tracking implementations do window checking in the established phase, like you have to be within, the current window. I didn't do any testing of that to see if that's if that's being done. I just tested to see if it was tracking in order to transition to the states.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. But
yeah, if we do some little bit more analysis maybe needed to see whether we need to track the sequence numbers, which is very expensive. If there is any other means at all to identify the flow and the corresponding action in the the RST or fin state and after, if there is any other means to track that rather than sequence number, if we can explore that, that'd be great.
So I could tell you by like my interpretation of the RFCs, there's not. That like the only way to be certain, for example, that you're at the last act of a connection is to make sure that the sequence number matches the fin, or the fin plus one, or the fin plus the data length of the fin packet. So to the RFC, I don't know of any other way to be certain that that it's the final fin, or on the sins, like I don't know of any other way to know that you're now in the established state. So you can maybe do something looser than that, but it's it's sort of outside of anything that the RFC would say.
Okay. We had done some analysis and there was something that we had identified, but I'm drawing a blank on that. So I will get back to you on that, John, offline, and then we can discuss it if that's a possible method or not.
I mean, I'm perfectly happy doing sequence number tracking. So like I think that that's how it should work. If that's something that's like too costly for you to do in your architecture, then I think it's a matter of whether it's acceptable to the customer. Or if whether Dash should define like options to sort of allow something looser.
Right. Yeah. If Dash can allow 2 ways to do this, one would be sequence number, otherwise, another way. So would like to discuss that.
Right, but again, like even if Dash allowed 2 ways to do it, ultimately the customer would decide whether the way you're doing it is acceptable to them.
Agree. Yeah.
Yep.
Sure.
Okay, so next week we will revisit the backlog. I will prepare items that we found in a recent month or two that need to be added to the behavioral model. So now let's go over the current status of things. So items in progress, we have connection tracking in the simulator. So we are proposing slight changes to the PNA architecture to accommodate for the use case of Dash. The pull request was submitted. We hope it will be accepted in a week or so. After that, we have all of the underlying implementation in the BMV2 pretty much ready. So it will be submitted when the PNA proposal is taken in. So that's the last thing we are waiting for. And then P4 runtime layer translation to the from SAI. This one was blocked by IPv6 support. Now that one is merged, I am doing merge to my branch, and this will be available probably this week. The final version of the pull request. I will resolve all the conflicts, and we will have this along with the initial test. Then we have another 2 items that are almost complete. Number 1 being UDP support, waiting for test infrastructure. So I think this one will be unblocked after I merge mine. Another one, support for list match type. So Kasim, are you with us? Can you update what's still?
Yeah, so on that we have been able to complete the development, and we are just waiting for you to grant access to the repo so that we can open the PR.
Which repository exactly?
The BMV repo, the BMV project that your fork.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. So I will take it with Christina. I'm not sure we need to keep it in the fork under my account. Maybe we should actually fork BMV2 under Azure, which Christina will help me do, and then everyone from this group will be granted access. So okay, understand. So this one is actually, let's say that it is blocked, and let me pending BMV2 fork. Okay, so I will deal with that together with Christina. We will have a public fork that you will have an access to, and then you can publish your changes there.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think that is it. As I said, all of the backlog and unassigned items, we will revisit them on the next session. We have a few more together with what John pointed out in his work. So please wait for next week to get an update on that. And
hey Marian, just one comment on that. Like, it would actually be really useful if like Microsoft could like formalize, some of these behaviors. I mean, we like, I think we'll have to add them to the backlog and everything, but like, we're sort of reverse engineering to come up with the behaviors. Like, it would be much better if it were just direct, like, these are the expected behaviors.
That's true. I agree. However, probably there will be a problem with that because sometime, well, actually what we're trying to do with behavioral model is to formalize all of these behaviors. So it's kind of the chicken and an egg problem.
Yeah.
But yeah, we can of course ask Microsoft to provide anything at least on what we found and verify that maybe there is something else that we are not aware of. But from what I feel is that we discover those as we go.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I'm glad you're doing this work, John, because I suspect we can ask them for requirements all day long, and it's just like when you get down in the level of detail like this, most people just don't have it on the top of their head, and so they won't bring it up unless asked, I think.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, good. Anything else anyone wanted to talk about?
Marian, I have a quick question. You guys think that all this information that that are now put in email should be going in some kind of documentation, at least in them, even though temporarily, so we can have a place where people can go find information? Or is it too soon to talk about documentation? What do you think, John or Marian? What do you think?
Well, I think it's all about if anyone is willing to do the work.
Well, I'm working on documentation with Christina. If there is but I don't have the knowledge of the details. But if you guys think that would be appropriate, we do have some documentation about HA, but I'm not sure that's covering now this evolution and this search that is happening right now. Because really, frankly, I was working, talking with Michael Zygmunt, and he was saying, would be possible to capture what is happening now in HA, so we can have a place where we can go and find out if we missed an email or whatever. And just something to think about. Let's put it this way. So if we can do that, I can help if we want to do that. And I can talk with Christina also. She's on vacation now, but I can talk to her. Just an observation.
So is it specifically for HA or behavioral model as well?
So yeah, that's a good point, Mary, because it seems the two things somehow. Obviously, there is an overlap. Obviously, they will, converge sometime. But we can keep them separate for now, and then we'll see how they evolve. At least we have something written down so people can look at. Let's think about Mary. That we don't have to decide right now. I just want to make you aware that I was talking with Michael yesterday just about that.
Okay.
I wonder if for the behavioral model, we shouldn't have only very high level documentation, because the idea is that all the details will be in the model itself. If we also have documentation that explains, for example, what we have discussed today, what John has brought to our attention, then we will have always to keep the behavioral model and the documentation aligned, and it becomes double work. While I think once we have the model, that should be the single source of truth. We probably need to open a PR with the new couple of items that Marian was. I'm sorry, not a PR, an issue with the two items that Marian was summarizing from John's email, but I wouldn't then document these same behaviors beyond having them in the behavioral model.
Okay, Mario, I think I agree with you. I think if we have a place like an issue in GitHub, that would be good too. So then that would be fine.
Yeah, so to Mario's point, I think on one hand, behavioral model, the one that we are building in P4, is the single source of truth, but it answers the question of what or how the system is supposed to behave. However, it does not always answer the question of why, and that's the reason we have supplementing documentation to describe why exactly we are the behavioral model is doing what we're doing.
Yeah, very good point. Yeah, I agree with you. Yes. You said it very well. When I said the high level documentation, actually, that's what I meant. Yeah, complementary to the. Yeah, I think that's a very good point. It's true, because otherwise people will see what's in there and they will not know the story of why it's there. And yeah.
Makes sense. So, Marian, I'm available if I will talk with Christina, whatever is needed, and we can do something in documentation. And
okay. So if there isn't anything else, I think we can wrap up for today. Give some time back to everyone.
Sounds good.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Marian.
Yeah.
Thank you.
bye-bye.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.